This isn't a simple story of escape. It's a story of rebellion, of human will, clawing through iron, of people who refuse to die in silence. In 1841, a group of enslaved men and women hijacked a ship and changed the course of American history. How did 47 enslaved people outsmart an empire, and what did it cost them? The story begins in the American South, 1841, a world drowning in cotton and cruelty. The plantations stretched endlessly, dripping with wealth and blood. The economy thrived on the backs of millions bound in iron and stripped of identity. America was booming, the narrator whispers. But its greatness was built on chains. On one of those plantations stood Madison Washington, a man with quiet fire in his eyes. He had once escaped north, tasted freedom, and then done the unthinkable, returned to rescue his wife. But capture found him again, and now he was shackled aboard a ship named the Creole, bound for New Orleans, a city that thrived on the buying and selling of human lives. They were supposed to vanish into the system forever. But that ship would never reach its destination. Below deck, the air was thick with sweat, sea salt, and fear. Wooden planks creaked under the restless bodies of men and women who knew what awaited them: a lifetime of forced labor, humiliation, and pain. Yet amid despair, something stirred. Hope, fragile but fierce, flickered like a candle in the dark. America in 1841 was a machine of control. Enslaved people were bought and sold like livestock. Families torn apart at auctions. Iron collars cut into necks. Whips cracked across backs, while slaveholders spoke of God's will. Every act of cruelty was dressed in the language of righteousness. Slavery wasn't just about labor, the narrator says coldly. It was about breaking the human spirit. But no chain could fully erase the idea of freedom. In whispered songs and coded stories, people plashed into abysses in 19, remembered Haiti's revolution, Nat Turner's rebellion, the murmurs of those who had run before. Those whispers became prayers, and those prayers became plans. On the Creole, Madison Washington's silence was not submission. It was calculation. He watched the crew. He studied their routines, the changing of the watch, the location of weapons, the moments of vulnerability. He had lost everything, the narrator says. And when a man has nothing left, he becomes unstoppable. Night after night, Madison whispered to others, men and women whose eyes no longer accepted despair. They spoke softly, cautiously, between creaks of the ship. They made a pact, sealed not by paper, but by shared suffering and unbroken will. 47 enslaved souls, bound for a life of misery, decided to risk death instead. The plan was madness: to seize control of the ship, overpower the armed crew, and sail to the Bahamas, British territory, where slavery had been abolished. It was a dream drenched in danger. But what was danger to those already living in hell? The narrator's voice lowers. They knew the price of failure. They had seen it before: men whipped until their bones showed, women hung for daring to dream. But on that night, they chose fire over fear. November 7th, 1841. The moon hung low and silver over the Black Sea. The ship creaked under the weight of its sleeping crew. Below deck, whispers turned into heartbeats, and heartbeats into war drums. Madison Washington rose. He looked at his people, brothers, sisters, strangers bound by a single purpose, and said, "We either die as men tonight, or live forever as slaves." The revolt erupted like thunder. The Creole's deck exploded into chaos. Washington and his allies stormed the upper levels, wielding whatever weapons they could find: knives, iron rods, bare fists. They struck fast, fueled by rage older than their lifetimes. The crew never saw it coming. Narrator breathes. They had underestimated the people they called property. Screams tore through the night. One crew member fell, blood spilling across the wooden boards. Another begged for mercy. For the first time, the enslaved were not the hunted, they were the storm. Freedom isn't born quietly, the voice declares. It screams, it fights, it bleeds. The ship swayed violently as the enslaved seized control. In less than an hour, the impossible had happened: the captives had become the captains. Now they faced a new terror: the open ocean. No maps, no navigation, no certainty of what lay ahead. But they had something the crew never did, the narrator says softly. They had purpose. When dawn broke, the horizon was endless freedom somewhere beyond the blue. They gathered on deck, exhausted, trembling, but alive. Madison Washington stood at the helm, his eyes on the rising sun. For the first time, the voice whispers, they were masters of their fate. But victory at sea came with a cruel question. Where could they go? They could not return to America, the South would slaughter them. Their only hope was to reach British soil, the Bahamas, where abolition had become law years before. They demanded the ship turn east. The narrator continues. Not to New Orleans, but to freedom. The surviving crew, trembling with fear, obeyed. And so began the second act of their rebellion, a voyage not toward death, but deliverance. The sea turned from black to gold as the sun rose higher. Each wave carried both hope and terror. If a U.S. ship found them first, it was over. If a storm hit, they'd drown. Yet, Madison Washington's voice steadied them all. He told them that freedom was not promised, it was earned, moment by moment, mile by mile. Hours bled into days. Food ran low. The dead crewman's body was buried at sea. Guilt mingled with relief. Some prayed, others stared silently at the horizon. But when the outline of land finally appeared, lush, green, and bright under the tropical sun, they knew what it meant. Nassau, the Bahamas, British territory. Under British law, the narrator whispers, slavery was illegal and freedom was waiting just beyond the harbor. They had reached the threshold of a new world. But the question remained, would the empire honor its laws or bow to America's rage? As the Creole drifted into the harbor of Nassau, the morning light fell upon faces that had known nothing but darkness. Salt crusted their skin, eyes sunken but alive. For the first time, they stood on the edge of a land where chains had no power. Yet, even freedom carried fear. They had taken a life, defied a nation, and now their fate rested in the hands of strangers. British officials boarded the ship cautiously, guns ready, voices sharp. The crew shouted, desperate to paint the enslaved as murderers, savages, pirates. But the truth stood before them, men and women trembling, not from guilt, but from exhaustion. Madison Washington stepped forward, his clothes torn, his wrists still scarred from shackles. He did not beg, he spoke, calm, firm. We fought for what was ours, the right to live as men, not cattle. The officials exchanged glances. They knew what British law demanded. Slavery had been abolished here for nearly a decade. Yet across the sea, the United States waited angry, watching, demanding blood. News of the revolt spread within hours. In Washington, outrage erupted. Newspapers screamed of a bloody mutiny. Politicians thundered in Congress, demanding the British return the ship and its cargo, the property they believed they still owned. But in the Bahamas, the story sounded different. The British looked upon them and saw not property, the narrator says, but people. One by one, the chains came off. Madison Washington and the other rebels stepped onto Bahamian soil free. The moment was quiet, almost sacred. No fanfare, no applause. Just the sound of the ocean, the same sea that once carried their ancestors in bondage, now carrying them toward deliverance. For the first time in history, the narrator breathes, an entire ship of enslaved people won their freedom through rebellion. But freedom did not erase the cost. Blood still stained the deck they left behind. One man dead, dozens traumatized. And behind every victory, the ghost of those who hadn't made it. The Creole affair became an international storm. Diplomats argued, newspapers raged, and the world watched two empires collide, one built on freedom, the other still drowning in slavery. In the United States, fear spread faster than truth. Slaveholders panicked, realizing their system could crumble not from politics, but from courage. If 47 could do this, one Southern senator wrote, then thousands could follow. And they did. The Creole Rebellion became a whisper on every plantation, a legend in every slave quarter. Songs were sung about the ship that sailed to freedom, about the man who defied death on the open sea. Madison Washington, Frederick Douglass would later write, is a true hero of the American slave, noble, brave, and free. But not all who fought lived to enjoy that freedom. Some perished from wounds, others from illness. Some were never found again. Those who survived carried scars that never healed. They escaped their chains, the narrator says softly, but not the memories of what it took to break them. And as the United States tightened its grip, passing harsher laws, sending more patrols, hunting more runaways, freedom for some meant tighter chains for those left behind. Still, the spark could not be smothered. The Creole Rebellion lit fires across the Underground Railroad. It told the enslaved that escape wasn't just a dream, it was a right worth dying for. Years later, historians would call it the most successful slave revolt in American history. Yet for generations, schools ignored it, textbooks erased it, and storytellers avoided it. America, the narrator says bitterly, loved the myth of freedom, but not the people who fought for it. Among black families, however, the story survived. Passed down through whispers, through hymns, through the rhythm of drums and hearts, it became proof that courage could defy an empire, that even the enslaved could rewrite destiny. The Creole Rebellion forced the world to confront the filth beneath America's self-image, a nation that preached liberty while selling human beings by the pound. The story of the Creole isn't just about a ship, the narrator continues. It's about 47 souls who refuse to die nameless. It's about the courage to fight even when the world calls you property. The camera drifts across the ocean, endless, shimmering, cruel. Waves rise and fall like breathing. In 1841, the voice says softly, 47 enslaved people looked at the same sea that once brought their ancestors in chains, and they decided to sail it toward freedom. They didn't just escape, they redefined courage. Madison Washington's name faded from official records, but not from history's soul. His story became a symbol of rebellion, of resistance, of the unstoppable human. Their rebellion wasn't chaos, the narrator concludes. It was the heartbeat of the oppressed, demanding to be heard. The final image fades to dusk, the ocean quiet, golden, eternal. A whisper drifts through the wind. We are free.